Hey, welcome to the Elle Russ Show. My name is Elle Russ, and I am a #1 best-selling author and master coach. My intention is to inspire, educate, and motivate you with weekly content featuring amazing guests and solo episodes. Visit my website, elleruss.com, to learn more about me, my courses, free masterclasses, partner discounts, and much more. Enjoy the show. All right, so today I'm going to tell a story that if you have subscribed to my newsletter, perhaps you have received it. On my newsletter, I send out weekly inspirational emails. Sometimes I'll show stories from my personal life. And this is one called Building Bridges, Not Walls. And it's not like, oh, we're living in a divisive society, and that's why I want to talk about this. But I love sharing my experience at a very hippie school in college and how it has really contributed to my life in a positive way. And I want to share it with everyone. And it also is very funny and random. Okay. So one of the reasons I chose to transfer, and this was 1993, I chose to transfer to what people refer to as the hippie school. Okay. This school is the University of California at Santa Cruz, always known as a super hippie school, especially back then. And here's why, because my first college experience, the college that I was at, the reason I wanted to transfer, that college experience revolved around what sorority or fraternity you belonged to. There were the theater kids who no one took seriously and thought were nerds. And then there were the pharmacy students who, everyone was like, whatever, they're just absolute geeks, like on a different level, can't talk to them. Then there were the pretty ballet dancers and they had some eating disorders. And then there were the drunken jocks. Like it literally felt like a scene straight out of the 1980s film Revenge of the Nerds. It was just so stereotype compartmentalized, and I absolutely hated it, to be honest with you. I hated every minute of it. I complained all the time, and I just couldn't wait to go. So I made the decision to leave, and I looked into transferring schools. I actually went to a college counselor at the time who was recommended to us. And I told them, hey, look, this is where I want to go. I want to go where people think more like I do, where no one's judged, people aren't made fun of. Like, I don't know, just where people are accepted for who they are. And so he chose UC Santa Cruz, the hippiest school on the planet. And I love to tell people about it. So I'm from downtown Chicago. And so upon transferring to UC Santa Cruz, this was just really interesting. I mean, first of all, going from city to a redwood forest was just absolutely incredible. And I discovered this joy of attending a college where none of those superficial distinctions I mentioned mattered. There was no Greek system that divided or categorized anyone. Their only sport teams were ultimate frisbee and rugby. Okay, that's not even like nobody even, I don't think even anyone knew like when any of these teams were playing. Okay, so it's like the school mascot, the University of California at Santa Cruz, the school mascot is the banana slug. This is a real slug, like a actual living thing. It's called the banana slug. You can look it up online. It's a very bright yellow hermaphroditic slug. I said hermaphroditic. Yes, that means neither female nor male. Hermaphroditic slug that roams the floors of the redwood forests. Okay, like that's the school mascot. Now I know some of this sounds like it might be made up. There's some really weird stuff that went on at the school. I don't even think weird. I think it's awesome, but it's just very funny. All right. Just side note on the banana slug, you might have seen it. It was prominently displayed in a T-shirt. A University of California Santa Cruz banana slug T-shirt was famously worn by John Travolta in the movie Pulp Fiction, Quentin Tarantino's film, sort of towards the end. And I think the Hollywood insight on that is that I think Quentin Tarantino's girlfriend at the time attended Santa Cruz, and maybe that's why. Either way, he wore a UCSC banana slug, big yellow banana slug on his shirt in Pulp Fiction. So that's sort of where you might have seen it before. All right, so here's the other thing that was crazy. Believe it or not, there were no grades at UC Santa Cruz back then. Yes, I said it, no grades. If you pursued a liberal arts major, you instead received narrative evaluation. So consequently, there was just no academic competition among the students, and everyone coexisted harmoniously because no one was like, what grade you get? What grade you get? What's your grade point average? You'd be like, how'd you do on your paper? And you'd be like, I don't know. You read it. You try to figure it out. Like literally. And you might think, well, that's really confusing. So at the time, you might be like, well, how do you get into graduate school? Well, if you do really well at UC Santa Cruz, the narrative evaluation system works for you because then you leave with a ton of recommendation letters versus just letters like A's. But if you're sort of a B student at Santa Cruz, then every narrative evaluation is just going to say, Elle did good on the first test, Elle did good on the midterm exam, Elle did performed good on the, like, you know what I mean? It's like they just kind of keep using the same word that is associated with B. And listen, sometimes it could be probably really detrimental, right? If you get this crafty writer and your teacher wants to rip you a new asshole because you're a horrible student, then you're going to get a really damaging evaluation versus maybe just they did horribly, right? So they had no grades, so there was no competition among the students. Now, some people ask, that's impossible. How can you have no grades? Listen, the people that were in the sciences, they were allowed to have grades. Like there is no way you either get the math problem right or wrong, right? It's not ambiguous, okay? So when I said in the beginning it was like for the liberal arts majors, so the only way to get grades at UC Santa Cruz was in subjects like biology, physics, math, etc., right? But if you took sociology or any of the stuff, and by the way, back in the day there, I transferred there in 1993. A friend of mine's parents was really pissed off about the narrative evaluation situation, and their son was a sociology major, and they fought the school and tried to get them because they were like, no, we're not like we don't want to pay for college, and our son doesn't have freaking grades. And the school was like, sorry, nope, tough shit. So it was like really difficult then. Like you had to be a science major in the science to even get grades. You couldn't just like optionally choose to have them. Um, and here's the thing that's really the most important about UC Santa Cruz, in my opinion, in my experience there. Everybody was embraced for who they were. Even the guy who strolled around campus with a 2-foot plastic baby doll dangling from his belt. I sometimes wonder about him, but you know what? I can't help but smile because nobody mocked him. No one made fun of that guy. No one rolled their eyes. That guy was free to be himself. He didn't bother anyone. And that's precisely why I cherished UC Santa Cruz. And it gets even more unconventional than what I've already told you. So UCSC had a clothing optional policy. That's right. I did not know this before going to the school. By the way, I didn't know half these things before going there. I just knew it was a beautiful school and that it was, no fraternities. All right. So it was clothing optional. That's right. So we had like two naked frisbee guys who would randomly play frisbee on campus naked. There were these two guys that used to ride around their bicycles and like throw out condoms and called themselves Bicyclists Underground for Freedom. I think they referred to themselves as Buff. Just a couple of random naked cyclists. Yeah. There was a woman who strolled into my class topless, and her nipples were painted as flowers. I can't even get started on the students who lived full time in the woods on campus and were affectionately called woodsies. I mean, there are just like endless tales. I've barely touched the surface about my experience at UC Santa Cruz, and I know that this seems really out there, right? And it all this stuff like clothing optional, grow grades, oh, it perfectly fits the California hippie stereotype that California haters love to rip on, right? It's like, oh my God, no grades, clothing optional, bunch of California freaking hippies. Look at these, and I find all of it really hilarious. But here's the thing. Consider this. Life in the real world presents us with enough damn challenges and judgments from others. So, having the privilege of attending a school where judgment was completely absent, where people and students felt free to embrace their true selves, everyone got along, It was nothing short of amazing. It was a small view of what life could be like if we were all a bit more accepting of others. So, Santa Cruz made me a much more empathetic, compassionate, and better human being. And I loved every freaking minute of being there. And I transferred there. The story of my getting there is a whole nother story in perseverance and stick-to-itiveness. I was initially denied admission to Santa Cruz. I was an out-of-state student trying to transfer. I fought my way in. I appealed the decision, and I eventually won my appeal, and I got to go. So I like to provide this kind of Santa Cruz vibe for others wherever I go, that they know that they're welcome, that the person that's in the corner of the room that I can sense is shy or having a tough time is the person I'm going to go talk to. What steps can you take? Think about what steps you can take maybe to like just dismantle a wall or two, or maybe just not get mad at the uncle who you disagree with and just let him have his bullshit for that day. You know what I mean? Like maybe it's just fostering more inclusive, supportive interactions in your life. It's just it's worth a look. It really is worth a look. Now, there's also something that goes along with this like hippie school sort of situation that I went through. And a lot of times you get people who, no matter what the cause is, no matter what the situation is, are kind of posers, right? So here's a great side story. I was randomly paired with three roommates in an on-campus apartment. So it was like, a kitchen, a living room, a bathroom, and then like three rooms. So, but it was like an apartment. And so it was four of us total. And I was randomly paired with three vegan roommates. And when we first met and chatted and like how we would handle chores or blah, blah, blah. First of all, I didn't, just so you know, I didn't even know what a vegan was at all at the time. And this is again 1993. I had heard of a vegetarian. I did not, when I heard what veganism was, I was like, wait, what? Like, so I was really confused. But anyway, when we first met and chatted about how we would handle chores and all of that, they all asked me not to cook meat in the apartment. Now, if you've been listening to me for a while or you know anything about my work with confidence, you probably, or even just paleo, you probably laughed out loud when you just heard that because you can probably also guess what I said. So these three vegan roommates were like, hey, we don't want you to cook meat in the apartment. And I said, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to accept that. If you had such a strict living requirement, you should have taken it up with the school, and you still can. But I'm going to be cooking meat in this apartment where I live whenever I feel like it. So that's another lesson there. Anyway, here's the great part about this. So they were three vegans. All asked me not to cook meat. I was like, yeah, we're not playing that game. Should have complained about that before you got hooked up with a meat eater, right? So then anyway, wait for this, wait for it. Later on that school year, I walked in on one of my roommates. So you know how like a bedroom door is ajar, so it's open maybe, 6 inches or so, 12 inches or so, and you sort of like tap on the door as you're pushing it open, like, hey, kind of thing. I did that to one of my roommates, and they were eating a meat lover's pizza from Pizza Hut. And they looked up at me and they're like, oh my God, don't tell anyone. That's so, okay. So my closing on this is that even worse than a vegan roommate who asks you not to cook meat is a poser vegan roommate who asks you not to cook meat. So look, that was the other side of Santa Cruz too, right? And that goes for anyone out there that's like, oh, I'm going to go to a Grateful Dead show. Let me go buy a pair of Birkenstocks. Hey, be yourself out there. Don't conform to anyone else. I was myself at Santa Cruz. I was still the shit talking downtown Chicago type of girl that I was, but I am really happy about the environment, the society that was fostered at UC Santa Cruz. I will never forget it. It is literally the one of the best educational institutions I've ever been at, and I felt like I've had really great education. But now I think nowadays, the recording of this in 2024, I believe Santa Cruz has gone completely to all grades. I don't think narrative evaluations are even an option. But And the other thing I want to say about UC Santa Cruz, which was very interesting, because we are in a time now where the words transgender are more like in the ether. And what's funny is that that is so not new to me. And if you're listening and you're outside of California, perhaps it was more foreign to you until recently. But I also like just have to commend UC Santa Cruz. So in 1993, when I arrived there, there was a building on campus that had already been there for years. So it had at least been there for, I don't know, let's say 5 years before me. So the late 80s. And the building on campus, the sign said gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender center. And I remember being like, whoa, like, oh, the first time I saw it, I remember being like, wow, that is like crazy progressive. Now, I'm not sure, perhaps the reason is I could be wrong in this fact, but I believe Stanford might have been one of the first places in the US where they did transitioning stuff. So maybe that's why, because Stanford's in California, it's not too far away from UC Santa Cruz. Either way, like so you can imagine, and by the way, nobody made fun of any of that shit on campus. It was just like normal and accepted. It was like, all right, yeah, there's those people that fit that category and great. Like they have somewhere to go, like whatever. It was just an extremely progressive school. I'm not saying all schools need a center. I'm telling you, the level at which Santa Cruz was at, even back in the late 80s, and it's 2024, and it's becoming a new subject in the past 5 years, but it's not new. Um, what is a problem now that Santa Cruz definitely nailed is the ability to create an environment where everybody gets along. And the the only differing factor is that when you go to Santa Cruz, you are choosing to go to a place where you know this is the case. And if you choose by accident, you get there and you're like, oh my God, there's this center on campus. Well, then you can leave, right? But most people go. I went there because I was seeking that. I mean, not that building. I was seeking the idea of everybody being accepting, getting along, not having, sports teams or fraternities and sororities and this kind of typical situation. Um, I didn't, I wanted to go to a place where no one gave a shit if your friend was gay or black or like, I just wanted to go. I grew up in downtown Chicago. I grew up in a very open-minded melting pot city. So when I went to the first school, which was a very homogenous school, um, and very, in my opinion, sort of harsh mindset. UC Santa Cruz was like it's like be careful what you wish for because now you've got like naked drum circles happening behind your cafeteria. No, for real. Or you go to the bookstore and you're like, oh, this woman is protesting something. She's holding up a sign. Oh, she's painted her entire body white and her pubic hair is green and her hair's green. Like that happened one day. I had a friend visiting and I was like, oh, let's just walk around campus. Roll up to this. She's like, oh my God, someone called the police. I'm like, no one's going to call the police. She's allowed to be naked, standing in front of the. I mean, people would smoke weed all over campus, like all the time. Weed was not legal in California then. And I mean, like the chancellor of the school, people would literally every Friday at 4:20 go out in front of the chancellor's office in front of the library. About 50 people would line up in a circle. People would bring their 6-foot bongs and everyone would smoke marijuana and the campus police would drive by and just make sure no one was really driving or there wasn't a problem. And like that was the end of it. And I was like, where the hell am I? What is this place? Now that may sound really sketchy to you, but when you're there, I had the contrast of being at a school that was fueled by alcohol, where you would hear and saw the woman walk out of a fraternity naked at 2 a.m. and then go, uh-oh, and then like later found out she got raped. Like, like that's the kind of stuff. And I did not see any of that stuff at Santa Cruz. It was certainly a lot of stoners, but there were no frat parties, no big drunken keg parties, and no one was out of hand. And again, I'm not saying that there weren't instances where that might have happened, but that was the general vibe. And it just seemed it was safer, it was more accepting. And No one was spoken down to or made fun of. No, there were like catty bitches walking around talking shit about each other. People were just cool with whoever the fuck you were, whatever you wore. Like it didn't matter. And I just really love that. And I like to take a little bit about that, a little bit of that with me everywhere. And maybe there's a part of you that can be even more tolerant or, uh, think about how you can be a little bit more inclusive or just get along a little bit better or avoid situations where maybe that are going to bring up triggering, contesting situations. But how can we build the bridges, right? And not create the walls? There is something to learn from everybody that's out there. All right. Hope you've enjoyed this episode. If so, and you haven't, I would love it if you could go on Apple or Spotify, write a review, reach out, Elle@elleruss.com. And of course, visit my website to take a look at courses and masterclasses, free stuff. I'll see you next week. Hey listeners, over the years, a ton of companies have approached me to collaborate, but I will only promote companies whose products I believe in and that I actually use and consume on a regular basis. So let me tell you about some of my favorite companies that I can offer you discounts for. Rep Provisions, an amazing company doing incredible things for our planet, topsoil, and animals with regenerative agriculture, and it's my #1 source for quality pasture-raised meat and chicken. Visit repprovisions.com and use code L15 for 15% off. I'm also obsessed with a company called Carnivore Crisps. They make a lean, all-natural, and delicious alternative to conventional snacking, made with just real meat and real salt. Totally addictive, and my favorite ones are the beef brisket and the ribeye. Visit carnivorecrisps.com and use code PALEO10 for 10% off. I also love and regularly use Paleo Valley products. They make amazing supplements and delicious paleo products. I use the superfood greens powder, grass-fed beef sticks, the organ complex, and their bone broth bars. I love the lemon and apple. I also use their essential C complex and more. Visit paleovalley.com/promos/Elle Russ for 15% off. I also love Primal Kitchen. They make delicious paleo-approved, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and no refined sugar products, and I use them daily, from their collagen powders and sauces and marinades to their avocado and olive oil. So good, so healthy. Visit primalkitchen.com and use code L10 for 10% off. I also love paleo powder and use it almost on everything I cook. They make incredible seasoning blends, and they also have these incredible grain-free coatings that feel just like crispy breadings that you would have had prior to knowing that there's another way. So visit paleopowder.com and use code L15 for 15% off.